All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual info session on Field Practicum or Field Education. My bad. Sorry, I messed that up. My name is Makia El-Ghamdi. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an admissions recruitment specialist for the Brown School. Thank you all so much for joining us today as we learn more about the various field education opportunities, as well as the student experiences that come along with it. I'm really looking forward to starting the discussion, and we already received plenty of questions in advance. And if questions do come along the way, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. It should be on the left area. If you see that, it'll say Q&A. So throughout the session, if you have any questions, just submit the question through the Q&A feature and we'll answer them at the end. And so as we get started with the panelist introductions, I would love for the audience to introduce yourselves, give us your name, your pronoun, and where you're joining us from today. And if you don't know how, use the chat function. It's right at the bottom. It says chat with a little speech bubble. Click that, and then you can write your name, pronoun, and everything like that. And now I am going to have to ask each of our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. And I am now going to have Katie start the introductions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Katie. I use she, her. I'm a third year in the MSW MPH dual degree program, so graduating in May. My concentration in social work is social and economic development, and then I am on the generalist track in public health. I have actually completed all three of my practica already, but the sites that I worked at first was a fatherhood center in St. Louis, and then I was at a nonprofit law center, and then my final one was at a free youth clinic in St. Louis. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keandra. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I am also a third year dual degree. MSW is a health concentration and my MPH is a generalist. Currently, I'm completing my third practicum. My first one was at the Program for Elimination of Cancer Disparities at Siteman. My second one was at the City of St. Louis Department of Health, and I'm completing my third one at the Bioethics Research Center over at the Med School on WashU's Med campus.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm also an MSW MPH third year student, so same as Katie and Keandra. She, her pronouns. I am from Colorado, from Boulder, and I'm a mental health concentrator in the MSW and a generalist in the MPH. I have done 3 completed practica. So my first one was a medical case manager at Casa de Salud, which is a nonprofit clinic focused on immigrants. My second concentration was also at Casa de Salud, but it was in the mental health wing of the organization, and I was a therapist. And then my third one, which is also my current job, is at the Center for Health Economics and Policy at WashU at the Institute for Public Health, where I do health policy research.
Hi, my name is Bill Ifa. I use he, his pronouns. I'm in the MPH program, Global Health. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa, but I live in Philadelphia. I moved here from Philly. I had my practicum at the City of St. Louis Department of Health with the environmental health section. I still currently work there now. I think that's about it for me.
Hey everybody, my name is Cassidy. I go by Cass. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a second year student in the MPH program, the generalist track. And this past summer, I had an internship practicum experience with the US Environmental Protection Agency. And I actually continued to intern for them throughout this past fall semester. It just ended in December. And I'm from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I'm currently in St. Louis.
Hi everyone, glad to have you here. My name is Lucy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Bethesda, Maryland, though St. Louis is now my hometown. I've been here for a while. In the MSW program, I'm concentrating in domestic, social, and economic development and specializing in system dynamics. And I've had a couple of practica. During my first year was at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office. And then the two practicum I'm working on right now are one at a nonprofit law center, Arch City Defenders, as well as a trauma-informed advocacy group called Alive and Well Communities, as part of the Racial Equity Fellowship that the Office for Field Education actually runs.
Hooty hoo, friends, and welcome. My name is Kellen and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am a third year MSW MBA joint degree student and I am from Denver, Colorado. I did my first practicum here in St. Louis at the Behavioral Health Network of St. Louis, working in transitions of care for behavioral health patients. And then now I'm currently at Barnes-Jewish Hospital working across the trauma ICU, the cystic fibrosis outpatient, and the bone marrow transplant outpatient clinic.
Hi, y'all. My name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Berkeley, California originally, and I am a MSW and MSP paired degree student, and my MSW is, I'm concentrating in violence and injury prevention. And I did my foundation practicum also at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, same as Lucy. I did my MSP, I did two practica for my MSP. I did like an elective, like 1 credit practica at the St. Louis County Executive's Office during the spring semester. And then I did a summer practicum supporting like the research initiatives of a faculty at the Brown School who does a lot of international work with refugee well-being and gender norms and equity with like international focus. And I'm currently doing my concentration practicum at the Children's Advocacy Services of Greater St. Louis, providing trauma therapy to children and families.
Oh, it's always so good to hear like people talk about their practicum all at once. I don't get to hear that very often. I'm Jenni Harpring. I am the Assistant Dean for Field Education, and I also teach in both the public health and the social work curriculum. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about field education at the Brown School. I am from St. Louis. I also am an alum of the Brown School. And so I did my practicum a long time ago in I did my foundation practicum at the International Institute, which is a refugee resettlement organization here in St. Louis. And I did my concentration practicum in Ghana. And then I also did 1 credit of concentration practicum, interestingly, in the Office of Field Education as a student, where I now work now.
Thank you all so much for being here and for your lovely introductions. So before we start the panelist discussion, I am going to give you guys a small presentation over the important details of the practicum at the Brown School. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully everyone can see it. All right, so everyone at the Brown School, specifically students at the Brown School, complete field work known as a practicum. So the practicum is, it gives students an opportunity to learn in the field under the guidance of an established professional. And through this, the Brown School has provided a framework that is self-guided for students, meaning that students are able to choose their own site. And this is supported by recruiting events, virtual or in person. Nowadays, it's more virtual, as we all know. And this is also supported by conversations with field faculty. And so what that also means is students are supported through meetings with field education faculty, so they're able to pinpoint their goals for their practicum and also find interest within or find their interest within the practicum. So this is really important because a lot of students come to us and they're not entirely sure what they want to do, or they don't have an idea yet, but they're able to meet with their field education faculty and kind of talk through it and find their sites. And with that being said, we have an extensive amount of sites, over 400 plus sites, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And so this is kind of the framework that we have for students, that it's self-guided, supportive, and extensive. But we also have requirements for each program So starting with the MSW program specifically has their foundation hours and their concentration hours. So for the foundation hours, it consists of 360 hours that can start in their first spring or summer semester, and it has to be in St. Louis. For the concentration hours specifically, it's going to be 600 hours, and they will start during their second year. This looks a bit different for advanced standing students because their timeline is a bit restricted. So they will start with their concentration hours automatically during their first spring or summer semester with 600 hours dedicated to their concentration hours towards their practicum. And I just want to highlight that this is an important factor for mental health and school social work students because they have the option to start in the fall. And then moving on to the MPH program, the practicum will consist of 360 hours between their first and second year. And then for the MSW and MPH students, they'll have a foundation section, dual section, and concentration. So for the foundation hours, it'll be 360 hours dedicated to foundation courses or the foundation. And then for the dual area, it'll be dedicated to 360 hours, and this can be split to meet the needs of the MSW and MPH program. And then for the concentration, depending on what they're doing, there'll be 240 hours dedicated to that. And then last but not least, we'll have the Msp program, which is 3 credits equivalent to 360 hours. And they are able to start this during their summer after completing all their coursework. And now I am going to hand it off to our Director for Field Education, Jenny, to start the panel discussion. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Makia. I'm really excited to have this group of students here to talk about the wisdom and knowledge and experiences they've gained from their practicum. And we're going to start talking about how COVID has impacted practicum. So what Makia just presented is what are our normal expectations of practicum, but those have shifted and we've built in a lot of flexibility and elasticity for practicum during the pandemic. But I was wondering from the students, can you talk about how the pandemic has impacted your field education? Some of you have had really traditional experiences like 2 years ago and are now in a pandemic related practicum. So if you could talk a little bit about how the pandemic has shifted that practicum, that would be great.
All right, I can go. So I'm in the global health program, like I said. Originally, my practicum was supposed to have been in Ghana. I don't know whether maybe we will talk about this later on, but you also have the opportunity to affiliate sites if you so wish to. So I found a really cool practicum in Ghana with the Global Brigades, and I was going to go do that originally, and then the pandemic hit. So I sort of had to re-figure out how I'm going to do all of that. So traditionally, I think I would have, if there was no pandemic, I would have just been on a plane, gone, done my practicum and come back, right? But I couldn't go. So the next best thing I could find, which actually turned out to be a better experience, in my opinion, for me, was working at the Department of Health, the City of St. Louis Department of Health. And I found that practicum through the Office of Field Education. They were super helpful. They were super engaged. They were really, empathetic about the plight of students, having had plans which had to be curtailed due to one reason or the other. And they put feelers out there. They found practicums and shared it with us. So I found one there, and I really loved what they wanted me to be doing, what I was going to work on, and it was something that fit my purposes, and I engaged in that. And I say that to say that it was really challenging, trying to move away from having planned, bought tickets, you're going to go to Ghana, you're going to spend this time, do this practicum, and to suddenly shift, have a change in your mindset to focus on really finding something in the US, finding something virtual, to do and all of that. It was a bit difficult and a bit challenging, but you know, one of the things that we also being trained is to be versatile and being malleable. So for me, it was that quality came out. Being malleable and being flexible about things came out through this whole experience, and that's one of the things that I picked up from this whole experience. Yeah.
For me, mine was the opposite end of it. I was already doing my second practicum with the City of St. Louis Department of Health, and I had to go from going into the office to doing work remotely. And this wasn't even in the same state, because by that time I had moved to another state. So I was still able to do the work virtually, and my supervisor was able to give me tasks and find different ways for me to complete the tasks that I was supposed to have finished in person, where I would have been meeting with people, doing town hall meetings and things of that nature, to figuring out how to send that information virtually, especially to people that that may not have been able to come to those town halls initially anyway. So I think it was I was like, wow, like Bill said, I had to be extremely flexible in making sure that I met the requirements of what I had initially placed out to do, and do that and while still being safe at the same time. So, yeah.
I can jump in. I'm a second year right now. My two concentration practicum, yes, both will be like start and finish fully online. And I think, you know, as folks are sharing their insights, one of the things that I thought about was just how it affected my capacity to sort of learn from and take in all of the different things that I wanted to at the site. So not just specifically with my supervisor or the projects that I'm working on, but just watching, you know, folks in the community doing work that I'm really excited about doing. Sitting on my couch and engaging in, you know, very specific projects is different than being able to share office space with people, have sort of casual check-ins and learning opportunities from other employees at the organizations that I'm working at. And I think one of the things that I've really felt supported in is that all the staff at the organizations that I'm affiliated with, even if not my direct supervisor or project managers, have made themselves really available for those informal check-ins and informal discussions so that I can sort of expand my learning. You know, one of the values of practicum is sort of just getting exposure to different pathways and different work that folks are doing. So I maybe have had to do a bit more of the initiating of those conversations, but have found, though I am sitting on my couch in my living room, I've still been able to have those conversations and learning with folks through online platforms, though it looks a little different.
Jenny, unless you're going to move to a new question, I can share my experience. So I started in May of 2020. So I also had my final practicum was all online as well. And I was at the Spot, which is a free youth clinic in St. Louis. And when I interviewed, it was pre-COVID. They were going to have me come in and do a lot of direct practice work with the clients there and health education and that kind of thing. And then that really had to pivot, obviously. And so I came in at a really hard time, but also kind of a transformative time, because COVID was exposing so many of these ugly disparities that were like already there and just kind of making it worse. And so I was able to start and be a part of these organizational conversations from the beginning, when they were like, okay, well, knowing what's going on now, how do we like continue making our services accessible and easy for people to get in and get an appointment and be seen, get STI and HIV testing as they need, kind of et cetera, et cetera. So I was part of those conversations, and it was actually really cool because they were like, well, Katie, what do you think about this? And how can we work on this program? And I actually ended up being and helping with a in-home HIV testing program, which they were just sort of getting off the ground as I was an intern. So it really, it was hard doing it all, not being on site, but also being a part of those conversations and still feeling so involved, and like my voice and opinion was sort of valued at the table was really cool. And ultimately we were able to still do some like youth engagement events outside in the park. So yeah, it kind of changed and we were just really flexible as we were going with it. But but I think it ended up being really meaningful in the long term too for the services they were offering.
I just want to add like one quick thing as well. So I was actually working at the St. Louis County Executive's Office during last spring when we went into lockdown, and so all the projects that I was working on like vastly shifted and changed. But it was also like incredibly interesting to be part of like local government and like kind of seeing the response and having like an inside view into the pandemic. And we were working on like projects kind of like as needed, like pulling like. I think one of my projects was like pulling like data on what other cities around like similar size to St. Louis were doing in terms of like stocking grocery stores and stuff like that. I don't necessarily know like where that information ended up going just because like chain of command kind of like everyone was just like in like response mode so much. But for me anyways, even though like the projects, it was kind of like heartbreaking to not be able to finish some of those projects, like it was still like a really big like learning experience for me during that time.
Thank you all. Anyone else want to chime in before we move on to our next question?
I'll just say real quick that I got a whole other set of skills because I was working in person as a therapist, and then we were doing telehealth. And so now I actually know how to do physical in-person therapy and teletherapy, which I think teletherapy is going to be a growing area in the future. So it was a whole new skill set, and I appreciated that.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about your search process. You know, for prospective students, the whole idea of like selecting your own practicum can be really exciting. It also can maybe be a little bit daunting. The Brown School is pretty unique in that we allow students to choose their own practicum and we don't match students to practicum. So can you talk a little bit about what your search was like? And anything from like what resources you used to help with your search, what your interviews were like, and how you decided where to end up.
So for me, I was able to use the resource of, so I went to undergrad at WashU, and so there's the alumni connection to the Career Center. And within public health, environmental health has always been my main focus and passion. So I reached out to WashU alumni at the Environmental Protection Agency in DC, and I kind of introduced them to the idea of the practicum and what that was. It was basically for me an internship over the summer, and it was wonderful. So with your practicum, you do have to have a field what is it called? A field instructor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is basically just your regular check-in mentor on site. So that WashU alumni actually ended up being my field instructor. So it was wonderful. And that was kind of my process of getting that to be my practicum.
I can also chime in here too, because I really like the self-driven model because it entitles you to kind of seek out opportunities that you yourself want. And so you really have control over how much assistance you do or do not get. And what I mean by that is at the early part of Makia's presentation, you saw that there are events that happen. I think within the first week or two of you starting at the Brown School, there is a Practicum Fair, and they have all kinds of organizations coming across, primarily from St. Louis, but occasionally there are other national and international partners there as well. And it's like right off the bat is where you can kick off that search. And I just really like that. That's how I found my first practicum. And that just really kind of streamlined me in there. And then just like Cass said, a lot of it does depend on kind of what your network looks like as you build that over your course here. So I actually found my practicum at the hospital through a friend who has now graduated and did her practicum under there. And so I was able to kind of meet all of the people she worked with and connected just one-on-one, and then applied through them and secured them with the Field Education Office. And so that's been really fun is to kind of find out exactly what it is you do and do not want to try and take part in as a practicum student, or it also gives you the freedom to choose a location that you're like, I don't know if this is where I want to end up, but I want to give it a shot anyway. So if you have more than one practicum experience, like if you're a standard track MSW student, what have you, it's a good place to kind of explore it. And then, you know, it's not super high stakes in that regard of like make or break your career path.
Lucy, do you want to go? So I like hated the self-directed part for my foundation practicum. I think I went to like the field education office like 3 times and like sat down with one of the education officers and just like went through like all of the different practicum listings and like he like told him kind of what I was looking for. They like highlighted stuff for me. Half of them were taking practicum students. Like, you know, it was kind of this like iterative process of just like even finding which sites were open, like which sites were taking foundation practicum, were they even ones that I was interested in. And I feel like I got really stressed in my first year of like feeling like I was behind on like my deadlines. And I got a practicum like a lot later than a lot of my peers did, which was stressful, like a stressful experience for me. But like I really second like what Kellen was saying. In that process, I also found a lot of the organizations that I was really interested in for my concentration practicum. And so I was kind of keeping that in the back of my mind, like, okay, they're not taking foundation students, but I'm gonna be on top of it and apply next year for my concentration. And still like what skills can I like build and learn like through this process? Like at least like getting my cover letter and like resume together. So that way, like next year, it won't be as like time consuming and stressful to do that part of it. And then, yeah, like I think your network like really does like expand. And I also like both of my MSP practica experiences or internships, I got through like just connections with faculty at the Brown School, just by talking to people and having like shared experiences and interests. And so like your network does grow, and like the search itself like helps like build your network for also like jobs that you're thinking about as well after graduation.
Yeah, this might be a little bit contrarian, but I actually enjoyed the whole search process, like looking for your own practicum process, because I kind of feel like it speaks to that whole skill of learning to, you know, seek out jobs, because that's essentially what you're going to do once you're done with your program. You're going to put yourself out there. You're going to reconnect with your networks, connect with people to be able to find your dream job or a job that you would love doing. So it was good. And one tool that was helpful was simplicity. Simplicity usually has a lot of openings and stuff on there. So I used to go there quite often to go check. The practicum I ended up with wasn't from Simplicity, but I think that was a good resource to keep looking at. And I think one other resource that I found also very helpful was the Office of Field Education. And a shameless plug to Ragini. She was always, you know, bombarding my email with openings, because I think she was a bit sad for me that, you know, I had made plans to go away and I couldn't do all of that. So I would get an email, hey, there's an opening here. And especially during COVID, for an MPH Global Health, I think there was a lot of opportunities for contact tracing. And I had already taken courses in contact tracing before, so I got all of that. But those were not things I really wanted to do, but she kept persisting. She would introduce me to people. I got opportunity to talk to other people. And I think another resource too was some of the professors at WashU. I got emails from Professor Levy. I got emails from other people who had connections even as far as in the UK who wanted to work with me. So it came from multiple areas, but I think the good thing is that you need to learn to know what you want to do, what you want, what you love, what you're passionate about, and go for that particular thing. So that whole skill of learning to, you know, go through that whole maze and actually get to what you really wanted to do was quite invaluable for me. Yeah.
I want to point out a couple of things that have been mentioned that you may not be aware of. So Simplicity is our database where we house who are our affiliated sites. And our affiliated sites are sites that have applied, meet the accreditation requirements, and have been trained to have field instructors. Cass was talking about the field instructor. That's kind of your mentor at the site that helps you both think about your role in the site, but also how you're developing as a practitioner. Simplicity as a database has some basic information, but we've also added what we call a virtual bulletin board that provides more up-to-date information as well. So that's another resource that's there for you as well. And then I think people have talked about this kind of network piece of like meeting with faculty in the Office of Field Education, but other faculty as well. And then really being able to kind of meet the second year students and figure out what they've done, I think is a really great approach as well. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that everyone was understanding all of the words that were being said. Anybody else want to talk, I think, about their experience? Then I have a follow-up question.
I was just going to mention, one of the questions you had asked was sort of how, once you had begun that process of figuring out what practicum sites were available, how you made the choice of which practicum to choose.
You read my mind, Lucy. That was gonna be my follow-up question.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I think what the other panelists have shared definitely resonates with my search, relying on field education, chatting with folks who I knew who were doing cool work in the St. Louis area. And I also thought a lot about like what skill set I was interested in working on and developing, which is sort of what I let drive the decision about where I was going to do my practicum, right? So I'm someone who's very interested actually more in policy level program design and policy advocacy, and took a practicum for my first year that was much more micro, direct service focused, in part because I knew that probably the job that I look for after graduation is not going to be one where I'm doing micro level work, but those are skills that I wanted to have exposure to. And so, in addition to what everyone else shared, I think something that I thought a lot about was, what are skills that I sort of have or want to develop? What are skills maybe that I don't have or don't think that I want to develop, but that it would be great to have exposure to. And I really let that sort of help me narrow down the organizations. Once I had an idea of what existed in St. Louis, narrow down the exact organizations that I wanted to sort of pursue working with.
Along the same lines, there was, when I was looking for my practicum, I found my first practicum at the Practicum Fair. But when I put in applications and had interviews, I didn't hear back for so long that I started to get a little nervous. I'm like, so are you like, do I apply it to another one? What's really happening? And then there was one that I had an interview, didn't hear back from. And then I had another interview with the organization that was primarily working with children. And I knew that that was something that I had recently done prior to coming to Brown School. I worked with a lot of children, worked with a lot of programming with them. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is something that I've done. And honestly, I sat and thought about it. I said, this is something that, because I've done this before, this is not something that I want to continue to do. So I actually declined that position and said, actually, I want to do something else that is completely different. So I actually heard back after waiting patiently from the organization. I was able to finally hear back and get situated with that one. And I'm really excited that I did, because that kind of domino affected where all of the other places that I went to, and learning how to not always take the first thing because I'm feeling super antsy, but just knowing like, okay, something's gonna come no matter how long it takes or no matter what everyone else is feeling, because you may feel that stress later on, like, oh my gosh, everyone else has a practicum, what am I gonna do? All of that. And you just kind of go on your own track and not allow that to dictate, what you actually cloud your judgment on what you wanna take. And then secondly, with the last part of doing something outside of the box, that's my last practicum, because I wanted to, similar to what Lucy was saying, I wanted skills that I knew I probably wasn't gonna get in the real life. Well, in the real world, because that's not something that I wanted to do. So I truly did take these opportunities as practicums to really just go into say, let's try this, let's dibble and dabble in this. And I feel like it expanded my people who I can count on to say like, oh, like she could speak to these type of skills that I have, or these type of skills that are not traditional, and with everyone repeating the same thing.
Thank you both. That's really helpful. There are students that come into the Brown School and know exactly what they want to do when they graduate, and they deepen that experience. So if Keandra had said, like, I've worked with youth, I want to work with youth, I want to continue working with youth, it might have made sense to take that youth focused practicum. And then there are students that are really looking at practicum as a way to kind of expand the way they see the world, get experience in different things. I've had students that have like worked at really large organizations that want an experience in a smaller organization. Lots of students that have either done direct practice or macro work that want to kind of flip that. And I think, the people on this panel have really taken a lot of different paths along that. Some of them have really done very linear work, and then others have been like, I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to try this. And we really leave that up to you. And there's lots of ways to think about it. One of the things that I think we've talked around a little bit is that you can affiliate a new site. If the site meets the accreditation requirements, we will affiliate them, and you can do a practicum there. And then oftentimes those sites become sites that other students complete practicum at as well. Katie, it looked like you wanted to jump in, or was I just, okay. Didn't want
Just nodding along with you, Jenny.
Okay. Great. Any other thoughts just about like how you made the decision before we move on?
I echo what Lucy and Keandra said. I also just want to say, like, I reached out to Jenny and I went on like a beautiful like sunlit walk around campus, like deciding like which practicum I wanted to take and kind of weighing out the pros and cons with her. And so that was really helpful as well. Just like field education are not just there as like resources to help you find it, but also to kind of help you process and like think through like the skills that you want to get, like their reputation in the community, like different pros and cons. And I'm like a big external processor. And so just talking to as many people as possible and getting their insight was really, really helpful and a great resource.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might just be also that you're doing this just for survival. I mean, let's just be honest, right? Yeah. So I keep referring back to the practicum that I couldn't go to. I really needed to find some. At some point, I was like, well, I can even wait and do my practicum this summer, like this coming summer. I don't mind graduating late. I would do that, right? Because I really wanted to go do that practicum. So when I thought about it, I was like, well, let me just find something to do, and it's just 360 hours, tick a box and keep it moving, right? It's not the end of the world. But sometimes when you put yourself out there, you find experiences that are enriching, because when I interviewed for my practicum, they made me know the work that I was going to do. I spoke with the director of the Commission of Health, and they wanted to review the city's food code, the city's food bill ordinance. I was like, I'm not a lawyer. I have not done any work in law or anything. My background is in medicine. So I don't think this is something I really want to do. And no offense to CAS, and environmental is also not something I'm really super crazy about, So, but I was like, let me just challenge myself with this and see. And I ended up really enjoying it. I ended up working across the board with the city councilor, with the director of health, with so many other people. And I really enjoyed that experience. So back to what one of us said, it might be that you might feel like the pressure is on you to find something. You really want to get this practicum going. Just work with that pressure at times. And out of that pure pressure, something precious can come out at times as well. At least it did for me. So keep that at the back of your mind as well. Yeah.
The last question I have before we move on to the questions from the audience is around global practicum. And I think Bill really spoke to this in your first answer around having an international practicum, not being able to go, pivoting to something local. Just to let you all know who are interested in global work, how other students have handled that. Bill also nodded to maybe putting it off to the second summer. We did have some students do that. It was kind of hedging, right? They didn't know how much things would change by their second summer, if things are going to change. There's also the trade-off then of like being in your practicum potentially abroad while you're looking for a job and what that means. And then we had a number of students that worked at organizations that had a global scope remotely. And so I would say like a lot of students across all specializations and concentrations have done their work remotely, but students have been able to do kind of that distance work as well. So Bill, anything you would add to that? Is anyone else a global? Oh, Bill and Hannah. Anything else you would
Yeah,
add?
you're totally right. I have some of my colleagues did that. Some of them worked with I forget the name, but I think it's Masafi or there's
Majasafi,
this,
yeah.
yeah, there's this famous organization, I think in Kenya. So they did some work remotely. Other people did their practicums from Uganda remotely and stuff like that. So yeah, that opportunity is still there. But I'm hoping that given the rate at which vaccines are being rolled out, and I'm just being a very cautious optimist that the coming cohort probably can actually travel and go do a global practicum, because I think that's one of the nicest things about, at least for my MPH, the global health concentration. It's one of the things that people look forward to be able to go out there and do some work. I worked as a physician in Ghana for so many years, and I didn't really need to go back, because I think that flexibility is also there. If you've worked in a developing country, you can have a practicum in the use, but I still really wanted to go back there to still go help. So it's one of the key things about some of the concentrations, and I'm hoping that people can go there. But if not, there are still really, really legitimate and real opportunities to do global work whilst you're still in your living room here in St. Louis. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add on briefly. So for my MSP internship, I worked with a faculty member who does a lot of international research, and I was actually supposed to be on the ground in Nigeria and then later in Greece during the summer, and all of that just got completely canceled. So instead I ended up doing more of like the research side of things, but I was able to still do like international data collection and like conduct key informant interviews with our partners on the ground there. So I even got some of like the like field experience, just kind of again like pivoted to like the virtual world. So, and it was like, I was disappointed. It wasn't like the skill sets that I had like gone in like intending and like wanting to develop, but I was able to work like really closely with a faculty member that I was doing my internship with, and it was still like really like great experience. And I developed like skills that I didn't even plan on having. So yeah, and it was nice to be able to still work like internationally and not have to just like switch completely to something that was domestically focused.
Thanks, Hannah. All right, Beth has been tracking our questions in the chat box. Do you want to?
Yes, a lot of good ones here. I think I am sensing a theme around, we have a lot of students here who are already admitted to the Brown School and very eager to kind of know what that, when they can start that practicum search, if they can see sites in advance, and what the optimum timing is to really start that search depending upon the program you're in.
Yeah, anybody want to answer that? I'm happy to, if no one wants to jump in. So as Kellen said, pretty early in your first semester, if you're a kind of a standard MSW student, we have a practicum recruiting event. It's a pretty large scale event, usually between like 60 and 80 organizations come, and that kind of kicks off the practicum search process. But as Keandra mentioned, sometimes organizations aren't ready to recruit that early. So we in the Office of Field Education walk this fine line of wanting to like meet the needs of students and support students, but also meet the needs of our organizations and support the organizations. And what we know is true is that organizations don't operate on an academic timeline. And so we really are kind of stretching and trying to get as much information out as possible. So really starting, you know, second, third week of classes with that Practicum Fair, kind of getting your head around what you're interested in, meeting with a field faculty member for the standard MSW students, and then also for advanced standing students that might be looking to start in the spring. It really is like you start about 3 or 4 months before you want, you start looking about 3 or 4 months before you want to start. And then there are a number of sites that have like really strict deadlines, and we get that information out to you as soon as we can. Often those strict deadlines are earlier. And so Keandra also talked about this a little bit. We get sometimes into a place with students where you've applied somewhere and you have an offer and you're not sure it's the right thing, but then you're interviewing somewhere a couple weeks later. And so we work with you on how to negotiate those timelines and getting back to people. And then it works the same for summer start. So if you're starting in the summer, we do a recruiting event in late January or early February, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how you think about the timeline and the process. Somebody mentioned the Career Services Center and getting together your resume and cover letter. They are an amazing resource. Like, people pay a lot of money to have someone workshop their resumes and cover letters. And we have an office that does that. They also do mock interviewing. And so that's a great resource. And we try to encourage students that direction pretty early in the process as well.
Thanks, Jenny. We also have a couple people that are eager to kind of see what lists are of agencies and organizations are currently affiliated with the school. If someone has that question, they could reach out to Brown Admissions and we could set them to talk with someone of one of our field faculty members and talk about the level of interest that they have and what organizations might kind of be a fit. Is that accurate?
We're happy to do that.
Yeah, I think there are so many. So if you do have a particular interest and you're really wondering what's available, I think having one of those conversations might be helpful, and they can help distill down and give you a hint at what might be available to you if you do enroll as a student. I see a question about the balance between having a practica, coursework, maybe part-time jobs. I'm wondering if our panel can touch upon that and how you do balance all those hours that you need to complete.
I love this question so much because it's really hard, right? I mean, this grad school experience, while enlightening and amazing, it does demand a lot. We don't want to sugarcoat that at all. And so it can be a challenge to kind of juggle your course load and making sure that you're there for families if you have them, or for yourself also, which is really important throughout your journey. And the first piece of advice I would give is to really ask yourself, what's your timeline? For me, that was kind of what got me through all of that. I started the Brown School working 2 part-time jobs and being class full-time, and then thinking through how I was going to squeeze practicum into that kind of scared me a little bit. And so when I did start that first practicum, I actually ended up letting go one of those part-time opportunities that I was working through at that time. And then I had to do a little bit of self-talking and trying to do math when I'm not a math person. You look at your 360 hours or 600 hours, and then you're either single semester, single and a half semester, or 2 semester practical opportunity. And you kind of divide, how many hours am I in class? How many hours do I need in this particular time frame to meet that practicum requirement? So when I did that my first year, I said 360 hours. I don't have a need to finish those hours by May 1 because I'm not graduating. I don't have any classes dependent on that. So it's okay if I extend into the summer a little bit. So like full disclosure, if you're doing 360 hours in 15 weeks, that's like 25 hours a week roughly, which can be a lot on top of your classes. So I scaled that back down to like maybe 16 hours a week, and then took a month into my summer to finish up those hours. And that's kind of how I moved through this second practicum of 2 semesters, where I did like roughly 16 to 20 hours per week in that first semester. And then this current semester, I bumped that up because I'm taking fewer classes. So biggest piece of advice to wrap up this dissertation, I'm so sorry, is what's your timeline? What do you want, and what do you think you can handle? And then if you need help with that, Jenny and Jewel and Rashid, and they're all there to help you. And I would strongly encourage just asking that question to them too.
I wanted to hop on to that point because I think I felt, just in my own experience, that for my foundation practicum, I had to have it done in the spring semester. For some reason, I don't really know why I was thinking that. No one was telling me that explicitly. So like Helen was saying, I was sort of having to do that and like figure it out in the number of hours. After I realized that it was, I had friends who were just doing their foundation practicum over the summer and were still like in class as regular, as normal in the spring. And then we're just doing it all over the summer. And so then following that, I was very intentional about doing my concentration and my dual degree, or my dual practicum over the summer. And it was, I think, much better for me and my stress level and my capacity, also doing a part-time job and full-time classes. So that is definitely a possibility. You can do all your hours over the summer. There's a way to make that work, unless you have, another opportunity or something going on in the summer that prevents you from doing that. It's totally possible, and it can be a really helpful way to balance all of that.
I think from, go ahead, Lauren, go ahead.
I was just gonna say my simple answer to that was I found a research job that I could just part-time do on the weekends. So I sacrificed my weekends and I will get them back somewhat when I graduate. Also, do like Kellen said, you're doing your little back of the envelope calculations, figuring out your finances, and it may be the case that you really need to find a paid practicum. And I eventually found a paid practicum on my third one. My first two were unpaid. And so I think if that's the case for you and you need it to be paid, you can be upfront about that in interviews, but other people can weigh in on that too.
Yes, and I was just going to say that from the MPH side, it's a little bit easier. It's 360 hours that you can easily do over the summer, right? So if in the summer you can just do that and get that done. So it makes it a little bit easier. You can. I did my practicum combining that with a job and full-time classes, albeit in the summer I wasn't taking a lot of classes. I took just about a few courses over the summer for that. So it's from the MPH side, it's a bit easier. You can get that done with the job. I have friends who had full-time jobs and they were able to finish their practicum in good time over the summer. Yeah.
Along with that, I know some people who have families and other priorities, like personal priorities, that were able to do that. Because I know a lot of us are speaking on us having our time to be individuals or who have so much free time to just, overwork ourselves and just like, oh, I'll get it later. But a lot of times there is a way to schedule it, span it out, even if you have family or other priorities that you need to attend to. But as Lauren said, definitely get the paid ones, and really ask other people who, if you feel like it's overwhelming, there are people you'll be in classes with and other things like that you say, hey, how were you able to do that, things like that. But I think it really is fitting pieces of puzzles together. So don't overwhelm yourself, you got it.
Very encouraging advice, Kendra. Thank you. I know we're almost at time here. I did want to, there's one question that kind of is lingering about virtual practicum. And I know, Jenny, we don't really know, but do you want to address kind of how you see practicum shifting maybe in the fall or spring semesters?
Yeah, so the decisions are really being made by organizations semester by semester. I would say between 15 and 20% of students are doing some in-person component of practicum right now. And we are working really closely with students and agencies to make sure that the appropriate masking and PPE and physical distancing and things like that are happening at the site. We did send out a poll to sites about spring or about summer and spring, and most of them said, I don't know at this point. And so I think, Bill talked about being hopeful about vaccine rollout. I think that we're all kind of in this space where we're being really hopeful about that. Sites, in particular, sites that are working with children tend to be our sites that have really need for in-person practicum. And we're trying to work with students to make sure that nobody who wants to be remote is in a practicum that's asking people to be in person. And then for those people who really want to be in person, just trying to get that information out as much as we possibly can. Hannah, are you in person at CAC?
Yeah, so I'm like a hybrid of being like part in person and part remote. So I was some of the clients, the kiddos that I was working with are pretty young, or like just had a preference for in-person services. And so I was seeing a couple of clients in person and then a couple of clients virtually. And I know my agency was prioritizing virtual clients for the most part. And so I'm mostly virtual now. But yeah, it was also like a conversation like with my supervisor, like was I comfortable with this? Like what are like the safety precautions? And yes, and I felt like definitely didn't feel like any pressure at all. A lot of the other practicum students at my site are totally virtual. And it was also kind of like a balance of like who's in the office at that time, like am I able, so it was like a couple of more scheduling considerations because the agency wasn't full-time all of the time. So I had to like schedule my in-person sessions on days when my supervisor was in the office, for example, just for licensure reasons and support. But yeah, it's been And then it's also been interesting to like navigate in supervision, like conversations about like asking clients to like put their masks back on and like what do you do in situations when people like show up, and like navigating wanting to support your client and like make sure your client has access to all the services possible while also like protecting like safety and policy protocols. So that's led to like some interesting conversations and dynamics that come up as well. And it's also been an interesting conversation just about like agency policies around access and like the families who aren't able to reach because of technology versus the families that were able to reach more because of technology. It's just an interesting time to be a therapist.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Lauren talked a little bit about her organization being able to pivot to telehealth. It has been really impressive to watch organizations figure out how to continue to be in relationship with practicum students during this time. We, to be honest, anticipated far more organizations saying like, we just don't have capacity for students right now because of the pandemic. And we haven't had hardly any of that. I think there's been like less than 5 organizations where we've had to help students find an alternative practicum site. So people have been really creative. People are really trying to figure out the best way to meet the needs of their client population and continue in the educational process with students.
Well, thank you all. I know we have a couple of announcements just to round it out, and Makia, her poor audio was not quite working, so I'm going to take over. So I know some of you are admits to the Brown School, which is great. Announcements for you, just if you haven't looked at our admitted student resources, we will continue to add resources to that site for you. So keep that bookmarked. Admitted Students Week, April 5th to 9th, we'll have a lot of great content that features current students and faculty and staff that week for you too. So we will have some announcements about what that schedule looks like. So save that week. Obviously, it's not the whole week. It'll be sporadic and work within work schedules. We're aiming for that. So admissions deadline, if you have not applied and you're still eager to apply, there is time. Our regular decision deadline is March 1st. And then we have rolling admissions following that. And May 1 is your deadline if you have been admitted to submit your intent to enroll. And next things coming up, we have our next virtual info session will be Tuesday, March 12th. That is the Brown School in St. Louis, how we engage in our community. Practicum is one way we really engage in our community, but there are a lot of other ways that we get involved and try to make St. Louis a better place and a more equitable place to be. So that you can register at brownschool.whistle.edu virtual for that session. As always, I know we didn't get to everyone's questions. There were a lot of great ones there. A lot of them were very specific to kind of your particular situation. That doesn't mean we can't answer them. Just please email us at brownadmissions@whistle.edu and we will connect you with the right person to answer your question. Virtual visits are also an option if you want to connect directly with our field education faculty. They can answer some of those more specific questions about our sites and how to engage in Practicum while you're here. So thank you all for joining us, our panel of current students. I know your time is precious, so we really, really thank you. And Jenny, thanks so much for your insight as well. And we'll look forward to chatting with you all soon.